Grant McCasland and crew continue to add to the Texas Tech 2025-2026 roster via the portal, this time with the addition of Villanova transfer forward Josiah Moseley. In today's video, we'll look at his stats from his lone season up in Philly at Villanova, as well as what can Texas Tech expect for him in his role suited for the 2025-2026 season. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfied here for the Back to 12 podcast. Appreciate y'all tuning in. And without further ado, let's just jump right into this one because I personally think that a lot of people, I mentioned this when we talked about him initially here on the channel, that a lot of people aren't going to be wowed by this commitment. And I get it. I'm not wowed by it, but I love the strategy behind it because he is a guy in his skill set, in my opinion, that basically fits the backup Lawan Watts role to a T. Now, is he as talented or as skilled as Lawan Watts off the dribble? Probably not, but Josiah Moseley has a lot of key attributes you want in one of those guys that can guard a variety of positions, and he can do just that. But let's go ahead and look at, well, his stats from his lone season up at Villanova. You can see it on your screen right there. He's 6'6", 228, originally from Round Rock, Texas, down by the Austin area. Averaged about 2 points per game, 2.3 rebounds, and just over literally barely had an assist, right? Didn't have many blocks, didn't have many steals whatsoever. And really, truthfully, when you look at this and you go watch the tape, because I know a lot of y'all love watching the tape after Texas Tech gets a commitment, the thing that stood out to me is Villanova just used him piss poor. I mean, just simple and plain, they used him in a way that I just didn't see his skill set, specifically as a true freshman, translating to success. They tried to use him almost in a hybrid Omari Spillman type way, for those that remember that name, back when Villanova had Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, that type of guy, right? Like that was what they tried to use him as, but a little bit more on the outside. This is a guy, in my opinion, that I think he plays bigger than 6'6". I think he plays probably about 6'8" with his size, and there's room for him to add a couple of pounds as well, and it still be muscle and him still be uber athletic. And that's exactly what he is. He's a guy that, again, I know to open the video, I said that he was really the Lawan Watts, backup, and I think he is. But the beauty behind this is I think there's minimal downside for Texas Tech. This is a guy in Mosley that was a top 75 recruit in the 2024 cycle out of high school, as I mentioned, down in Round Rock, and was the #1 power forward in the state of Texas, okay? The 11th overall power forward nationally, okay? He was a guy that was getting recruited by high major programs, decided to go up to Villanova. He wanted to return to the Lone Star State, and what better program than to do so in Texas than Texas Tech, right? Specifically with his skill set, because you look at it and he's got a lot of the same attributes a very raw Darion Williams had, a very raw Lawan Watts had. And now I am not projecting and saying Josiah Moseley is going to be D5. Do not hear what I'm saying. But Texas Tech has a type when it comes to these forwards. They like the guys that are a little bit bulkier, a little bit more athletic, that can play the four, even if they're on the smaller side in terms of height for a traditional four, but are athletic enough to create mismatches and also physical enough to create mismatches on the offensive and defensive side of the floor. And Josiah Moseley fits that bill. I think he's perfect in this rotation for Texas Tech. Do I think he's going to start? No. I said he was a backup. I think he's probably in that 8th, 9th man off the bench type deal where he's 8th, 9th guy in the rotation. And I think he probably plays in that 10 to 12 minute range with the potential for more if he lives up to some of that high school potential and pedigree that he had in the charts. Again, a top 75 overall player in the class of 2024 that went up to Nova. Now, speaking of Nova, I found it interesting in terms of the Villanovan. They posted an article about Josiah Moseley entering the portal, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on your screen right now. There it is. A little bit of a lag, but he entered the portal on April 9th. And the interesting part about Josiah Moseley is nobody saw him being on campus. Like, no, this came out of nowhere. Austin Massey was the one that broke the news over on Twitter, where Scarlet and Black's own He broke the news there in terms of, hey, he's on campus per one of his Texas Tech sources. And then you had Josiah Moseley actually go out and post on his Instagram stories, he was at Texas Tech and doing the whole, shebang in terms of an official visit, going through and making sure he's got all those great photos. But I thought this blurb from them was really interesting because I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, but we'll go ahead and read through it all. On Wednesday, April 9th, freshman forward Josiah Moseley announced he is entering the transfer portal after just one season with the Wildcats. His decision comes 1 week after the hiring of former Maryland head coach Kevin Willard, just 1 day after the redshirt freshman guard Chris Parker also entered the portal. Joe Tipton of On3 Sports first reported it. As I mentioned, Moseley is a 6'6" freshman from Round Rock, Texas, and signed his national letter of intent to Villanova in November of 2023. Now, he went to Stony Point High School, did Moseley, and he led the team in the UIL, hard for me to say, state basketball tournament. He was also named the 2024 Texas Gatorade Boys Basketball Player of the Year and Texas Max Preps Player of the Year. As a prospect, he was a 4-star recruit out of the class of 2024. Colorado State, Texas, USC, Georgia Tech, amongst other schools had interest in him. But this was interesting in terms of, you think about it from a Christian Anderson perspective and him having that experience in terms of the under 18 Euros, right? Well, Moseley had something very similar, but in the America's Cup, where he actually represented Belize, and he started at the tournament averaging 24.2 points per game and 8.2 rebounds per game. Kyle Neptune was the head coach that obviously recruited him, and he only played 30 games and only averaged, under 2 points. But you see it down below as well. 3 years of eligibility remaining. Now, I will say this, and shout out to the Villanovan for that great breakdown of Josiah Moseley, but this is a long-term play, I think, for Texas Tech. And I know that in today's, NIL era and college basketball era where everybody's kind of a free agent after 1 year, he could be gone, right? But I think when you look at what Texas Tech has done with prospects and similar archetypes to Josiah Moseley, this is a perfect fit in terms of minimal downside, a ton of upside, and a guy that has connections to the Texas Tech program. Obviously, most notably, the GM, Buff, that's where his connection is, as well as other guys on the staff. But this is a big pickup, in my opinion, from the standpoint of a rotation. Again, not a starter, but I love the upside here in the sense of Texas Tech typically gets, under Grant McCasland, the absolute most out of its players, right? And you go out and get a guy with top 75 pedigree in his respective class of 2024 and a guy that was ranked as the #1 power forward in the state of Texas, not to mention won the Texas Gatorade Boys Basketball Player of the Year award in the state of Texas. Okay, so you have that. He is a guy that I think could, again, play in that 10 to 12 minute range with more upside. But the biggest thing for me is now you have some versatility in the front court and you have a similar archetypes to Lawan Watts. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends, for Texas Tech in 2025, 2026, and maybe even down the line. I really like this pickup. Again, it's not going to wow a lot of people if you just look at the stats, but if you look at the pedigree, you look at the film, I think this is a quality pickup for Texas Tech and one that really gets me going in terms of rotation because, yes, you need that star power, and obviously Texas Tech has some, but you need really an 8-9-man rotation, and I think Josiah Moseley really fits in that role nicely for Texas Tech in terms of one of those 4 key guys off the bench in 2025, 2026, in year number 3 of Grant McCasland out in the 806. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. Stay in the know on all things Texas Tech men's basketball all year long, whether it's on the hardwood, in the portal, anything in between. We've got you covered right here on the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube, over 12,000 strong. Appreciate each and every one of y'all. Join the Back to 12 squad today by following those 3 simple steps I said earlier. I'm RC Maxfield, reminding you, as always, to stay safe and rep 'em Tech.